Welcome back to this new video in LINQ tutorials. Today I will explain the last element operator in LINQ. It's the operator, DefaultIfEmpty. In the last 4 videos about LINQ I explained the first 8 element operators. If you didn't watch the videos, I recommend you to watch them before watching this video. In this video I will show you different examples using the new operator, which are in relation with the old 8 operators. But also other 2 examples, how to get the row index from a data table. Or also how to use this operator in left outer join. Let's go. I mentioned in the last videos that we get an output from each LINQ query. The output could be an empty collection or a collection of elements. The collection could contain only one element, or more than one element. If we have a collection of elements, everything is okay. But if the output is empty, we get exceptions in some scenarios. To avoid these exceptions we can use the operator DefaultIfEmpty. So this operator is to get either the collection if we have one, or to get the default value, if the output is empty. The default value depends on the data type we have. For example, if we have a number data type like integer, double or decimal, we get 0 as default value. If we have string or object, we get null as default value. If we have boolean, we get false as default value. So for each data type there is a default value. What does the default value mean and when we get it? For example, if I am creating a boolean variable x without assigning any value, and I want to write the content of this variable into the console using writeLine activity, I will get false as result, because this value is the default value. So I didn't assign any value for this variable, but I got false as result. In summary, we get the default value of a variable, if we didn't assign any value. I will show you later in the examples, how to use the operator in a query. But before that let me show you the different ways, how to use this operator in a LINQ query. We have 2 options to use this operator. Either we use it without anything in the brackets. Or we can set a value in the brackets. What is the difference between both options? As mentioned, as output from a LINQ query we could have collection of elements or an empty collection. If we have a collection of elements, we will get the collection as output in both options. It means, if I have this collection as output and I am using the operator, I will get the collection as output. But if we don't have an output, we will get the default value, if we are using the first option without anything in the brackets. It means, if the data type is integer for example, I will get 0 as output. But if we don't have an output and we are using the second way, we will get the value we set in the brackets. For example, if we have an integer data type and we use the operator with this number in brackets, we will get this number as output. The value we set in the brackets should have the same data type, what we have in the collection. For example, if the collection should contains integer numbers, I have to set an integer value in the brackets. This is the difference between both operators. If you didn't understand the operator now, don't worry. You will understand the operator better later in the examples. One last thing before I switch to UiPath. We can use this operator only as method. It means, we can use it only in method syntax or in mixed syntax. But we cannot use it in query syntax. That's all about the operator. Let's now start with the examples. In the first example, I will show you different scenarios, how to use this operator with the other element operators. I have here a sequence. I defined a variable here. It's of type integer. Let's see the query in this assign activity. First I have a loop for the numbers of this array, which consists of 5 numbers. After that I have a condition to get the numbers, which are greater than 9. At the end I am selecting the numbers from the array, which meet the condition. After the query I have ElementAt or default operator, to get the number from index 0. As you see, the query doesn't return any value, because no number is greater than 9. So here I have an empty collection. But because I am using ElementAt or default operator, I will get the default value of integer, because I don't have any elements in the collection. And here I have writeLine activity, to print out the number. Let's execute the code to check the result. As you see, I got 0 as output, because the collection contains no elements, and because I am using ElementAt or default operator. Let's now change the operator to ElementAt. I will execute the code again to check what happens. As you see, I got an exception because the index is out of range. It means I am trying to get the element at index 0, but we don't have any element at index 0. To avoid this exception, I can use ElementAtOrDefault operator, as I did before. Or I can also use the new operator, DefaultIfEmpty. Let's use this operator to check what happens. I will add the operator before ElementAt operator. Using this operator in this way is exact the same, if I am using ElementAtOrDefault operator. So from the query we get a result. In this case we get an empty collection of type integer. And because the collection is empty, we should get the default value because of the operator DefaultIfEmpty. So the collection will now contain the value 0, which is the default value for integer type. It means, I have now a collection consisting of only one element. And using ElementAt operator with the index 0, I will get this element as output. So I should get 0 as result. Let's execute it to check if it's correct. As you see, I got 0 as result. So it works fine. Let's now set a default value in the operator DefaultIfEmpty. I will set the following number. It means, I should get this number as default value, if the collection from the query is empty. Let's execute it again to check the result. As you see, I got the defined default value as output, because the collection is empty. I will change the query again. I will change the condition here, so that I don't have an empty collection, but a collection consisting of elements. So here I should get the number 5 as output from the query. Let's see which result will we get from the query now, if I will get 5 or the defined default value. As you see, I got 5 as output. So we get the default value only if we have an empty collection from the query. I will change the query again. I will change the condition to get an empty collection. And here I will use the operator ElementAtOrDefault. So we have now two operators, DefaultIfEmpty and ElementAtOrDefault. And I defined a default value in case we have an empty collection. Let's see what happens now. As you see, I got the defined default value as output. So there is no difference between the operators ElementAt and ElementAtOrDefault, if we are using DefaultIfEmpty operator. These are the different combinations how to use an element operator with DefaultIfEmpty. The same is also if we are using the other element operators, first or default, last or default, single or default. Let's now summarize all element operators. Which combinations do we have? What does each one mean and what is better to use? We have these 8 element operators. We can use each operator with DefaultIfEmpty operator. Let's check them one by one. What does the combination mean? We have ElementAt operator. If we use it with DefaultIfEmpty operator, is exact the same if we use ElementAtOrDefault operator. This operator is also exact the same, if we use it with DefaultIfEmpty. It means, we could use each operator with DefaultIfEmpty, and the functionality is the same. The same also for the other operators. If we use first with DefaultIfEmpty is the same, as when we use first or default operator. The same also for last operator. And also for single operator. I am talking here about using DefaultIfEmpty without value in the brackets. But if we have a value in the brackets, we will get another result from using these combinations. To understand it better, I have the following table, where I explain the output of each operator once we use it with DefaultIfEmpty or without it. I have 5 different scenarios here. The first one is if we have an output. I mean if the sequence we want to get the element from it is not empty. The second one is when we have an empty sequence. The third one is, we have an output, and we are using DefaultIfEmpty with value in brackets or without value. The fourth one is, we don't have an output, and we are using DefaultIfEmpty operator without value in brackets. The fifth and last scenario is, when we don't have an output, and we are using DefaultIfEmpty operator with a value in brackets, x for example. Let's see the output of each operator for each scenario. I have the following query for example. Here I have only ElementAt operator, and the query returns an output. This is the output collection. Using ElementAt operator will return the following output. It means I'm getting the element as result. Assume I have now another condition. The query doesn't return an output now. The result in this case is an exception of type argument out of range exception. The next scenario is when I have an output, and I am using DefaultIfEmpty operator. The result in this case is the following. So I am getting the element again. The next scenario, if I don't have an output like this query here. The output in this case is 0, which is the default value for integer. The last scenario if I don't have an output, and I am using a value in DefaultIfEmpty operator. The result here is the defined value, because I don't have an output and I should get the default value, but because I defined a new default value, I will get it as output. These are the different combinations of using ElementAt operator. As you see, once we use DefaultIfEmpty operator with the other element operator, we don't get an exception. Therefore it's recommended to use DefaultIfEmpty operator with element operators, except you want to get an exception from the query. It depends on your need and what you want to do in your project. I also recommend you to use DefaultIfEmpty operator with a value in brackets, so that you define a default value to make sure, if the result is from the sequence or if it's a default value. In my opinion, DefaultIfEmpty with a value in brackets is the best one, but you can decide it as you want and depending on what you need. The same principle is also for the other operators. I will not explain each one in a query. I think it's clear for you now, what I mean with this table and what will you get once you use any element operator. One important thing you should keep in mind, that element operators are to get only one element from a sequence. It means, we always get only one element. The element could be a number, a string, a row from data table or also a group. So one element could be any data type. It depends on your query, what you are looping. As also mentioned, all element operators can be used only as method, as I did in all element operator videos. So you cannot use them in a query syntax, only in method syntax or in a mixed syntax. That's all what you have to know about element operators. Let's now switch to another example, where I am using DefaultIfEmpty operator, to get the row index from a data table. In some scenarios we need to get the index of a row, which meets a specific condition. To do that we can for example use for each row activity with if statement. Or we can also do the same using a LINQ query. LINQ is faster than for each row, therefore it's better to use a LINQ query to do that. In this example I will show you, which LINQ query do we need to get the row index. I have these two variables. The first one is of type data table. And the second one is of type integer. It's to store the row index, which should we get from the query. First I have a build data table activity. The table is stored in this variable. Let's see the table. It consists of 3 columns, ID, name and department. I have here different IDs, names and departments. I want to get the row index of this row, where the name is equal to Sarah. Let's see how to do that. I have here a LINQ query using method syntax. First I have the data table variable with as a numerable function, so that I can use LINQ operators. After that I used where operator, to get only the rows from the table, where the column name is equal to Sarah. It means, I am filtering the data table to get only the rows, which meet the condition in where statement. Until this point, I will get all rows where the name is Sarah. But as you know, we only have one row, where the name is Sarah. After that I use select operator to get the index. To get the index of a row, we need to use the data table variable with the function index of. For this function we need to set the row as input parameter. So here I use the row variable, which I defined in this lambda expression. After that I use DefaultIfEmpty operator with the value -1. It means here, if I have a value, I will get it, else I will get this number as output. At the end I used first operator, to get the index of the first matched row. It means, we could have more than one row with the name Sarah. But I want to get only the first index. If I want to get the last matched row, I can use last operator instead of first operator. I used method syntax to write the query, but I can also use mixed syntax to write the same query. And here I have write line activity, to print out the row index. Let's execute the code to check the result. As you see, I got number 2 as row index from the query. It means, the matched row where the name is Sarah, is at index 2. Let's check the table. The index within a data table starts always with 0. It means, the first row has the index 0. The second row has index 1, and so on. So we got number 2 as output, which means that the matched row is the third row in the table. It's correct. I will now replace the name Sarah with X, so that I don't have the name Sarah in the table. Let's execute the code to check the new result. As you see, I got -1, which is the defined default value in DefaultIfEmpty operator. This means that I don't have any row where the name is Sarah. Therefore I got the default value as output. And because I defined a default value, I got it as output. Now I will add the name Sarah more than once in the table. So I have the name now in the second, third and last row in the table. Let's execute the code again to check which result I will get. As you see, I got the number 1 as output. Let's check it in the table. I have 3 rows with the name Sarah. But the first row is at index 1, therefore I got number 1 as output, because I am using first operator. But if I want to get the last index, I can use last operator. Or if I want to get a specific element in the middle, I can use ElementAt operator. So we have different ways to get the index we are searching for. That's all about getting the row index from a data table. Let's now switch to the last example in this video. It's about left outer join. Left outer join is nothing but getting all data from the left side, with the matched data from the right side. I have for example these two data tables, first names, and last names. The first table contains these 2 columns, ID and first name. The second table contains also 2 columns, ID and last name. I want to have a new data table as output, for example names. This should contain the columns from both tables. It means, I want to have these 3 columns, ID, first name and last name. As you see, I have the ID column in both tables. It contains each ID only once. It means, this column is the primary key, which I can use to do the left outer join. Let's first see which rows do we have in both tables. The first table contains these 3 rows. I have each ID only once, and for each ID there is a first name. The second table contains also 3 rows. Each ID appears only once in the table, and for each ID there is a last name. Using left outer join means that I want to get all data from the first table, with only the matched rows from the second table. It means, I should have all rows from the first table in the output table. And for each row, I want to get the matched data from the second table, where the ID is the same. As you see, I have the IDs 1 and 2 in both tables, therefore I will get the last name from the second table. But for the ID 3 there is no matched data in the second table, therefore I will get an empty value as last name. This is what left outer join means and which result I expect using it. Let's switch to UiPath to see the query, where I can do these steps. I have the following sequence. First I have a build data table activity. The table is stored in this variable. It's the same table what I showed you before. And here I have another build data table activity, where the table is stored in this variable. It's also the same table, what I showed you before. So we have the first and second table. And the last build data table activity is for the output table. Here I defined only the columns, ID, first name and last name. I don't have any rows currently. And in this assign activity I wrote the LINQ query of left outer join. Let's see the query. First I am looping the rows of the first table, first names. Then I am looping the rows of the second table, last names. Here I used group join operator, to join both tables. The condition to join the tables is as following. I am checking if the ID of both tables is the same. It means, the condition of joining the both tables is using only one column. But if you want to join the tables using more than one column, you can add the other columns here to the condition. For each ID from the first table I will have a group. The group contains all rows from both tables, where the ID is the same. As you know, we have only these IDs in the first tables, from 1 to 3. So we will have 3 groups. We already have the ID number 4 in the second table, but this is not important for us in this case, because we want to do left outer join. Therefore only the IDs of the first table are relevant. In each group we have the rows with the same ID. The groups are now the following. After that I am looping all groups. Here I use DefaultIfEmpty operator, because we could have rows in the first table without matching row from the second table. So we could have no values, therefore we want to get the default value in this case. The third group has now new values. It has null values, because we have here 2 columns of type string, and the default value of string is null. And here I am adding the rows to the output table, names. As you know, we have 3 columns in this table, ID, first name and last name. Therefore we need 3 values. The ID and first name are from the first table, therefore I added them using the variable a, which represents the rows of the first table. And for the last column I used if statement. As you know, we could have a matching row or not. In case we don't have a matching row, we will add nothing. But if we have a matching row, we add the content of the column last name from the second table. Let's add the rows to the output table one by one. From the first group I will get the ID and the first name from the first table. And the last name from the second table. The same also for the second group. Now in the third group I added the ID and first name from the first table. But I have null as last name in the second table, therefore I will add nothing here. So this is the output of the query. After the query I converted the output to data table. This is how the query works. Here I added for each row activity to loop the output table, names. The content of the 3 columns for each row will be printed out. Let's execute the code to check which result I will get. As you see, I got the same result what I showed you before. I have the first row with ID and first name from first table, and also last name from second table. The same also in the second row. The third row contains only the ID and first name from the first table, and nothing from the second table. So I don't have a content for last name column. It works exact as expected. Assume now I don't want to get an empty string for the rows, where I don't have a content. I want for example to get the word unknown instead of empty string. I can do that in 2 ways. The first one is to replace the word nothing here with the new word unknown. Or I can use DefaultIfEmpty with a defined value. How to do that using DefaultIfEmpty? Let's see. First I will create a new variable of type data row. I want to add this row to the output table, names. For that I will write the following in assign activity. This is now a new row for the output table, but it's not added to the output table. This activity means now, that I have the same columns, as what I have in names table. And I want to add a value for the column last name in this row. I can use the row variable with the column name. And here I will set the value I want, for example unknown. After executing these 2 activities I have the following value. I have one row consisting of 3 columns. Only this column contains a value. I can also add a value for the other 2 columns, but I don't need that in my example. And this row is currently only a variable, and it's not added to any data table. Let's now edit the query. I will use the new variable in this operator as value. It means, I am setting a default value in case I don't have a value. I used here a data row variable, because the sequence contains data rows. In the previous examples I had integer sequences, therefore I added integer number. So we have always to use a value of the same type of the sequence, where we are using the operator DefaultIfEmpty. And now I don't need the condition anymore, because I already have a value. It means, once I don't have a value, I will get the new defined default value. Let's execute the code again to check the new result. As you see, I have the same output for the first 2 rows. The third row contains now a new value instead of empty string. So it works fine. This is how to use DefaultIfEmpty operator in different ways. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you still have any questions about this operator, or any other element operator, don't hesitate to write us. Thanks for watching and have a great day.